Hi guys, Stephanie here. Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of The Intentional Thriver. I just wanted to jump on and let you know that we had a little bit of technical difficulty with my mic, but we were able to edit around and you can hear me, although you will hear less of me this week. And we just wanted to let you know why. Enjoy.
I'm Justin Snyder.
And I'm Stephanie Greenwood Snyder.
We're just an average, everyday couple.
But over the years, we've seen the incredible importance of building community together.
We'll be talking with friends and experts about their stories and experiences to help us learn and grow.
We don't want to just survive through life.
We want to intentionally thrive.
This is The Intentional Thriver.
Welcome back to another episode of the Intentional Thriver podcast, the podcast where we ask the question, am I surviving or am I thriving in my life? So today we're going to do something a little differently. No, we did not run out of fantastic guests. We have a whole lineup of people with a bunch of different topics we're super excited to do. But this is one topic that Stephanie and I have been talking about for quite a while, and we definitely want to do an episode about it. We talked about doing it as part of a 7x7, but we're like, it kind of needs its own episode, because a big part of what the Intentional Thriver is all about is the idea and the concept of wellness.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that we just randomly decide on topics, but we totally don't.
we actually don't believe, which you would think, like looking at the titles, like, man, what does like real estate have to do with being like a social media influencer, which would have to do with like issues with religion, which, all kinds of different things.
We're really excited to talk to some of those friends and to talk about those topics. But when we boil it down, it really comes down to
dun, 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 one of our favorite words. What is it, Stephanie? Balance. It is. And we're going to talk about a little bit more of, again, what that means, what that balance means. And, for a while we were like, man, it does feel kind of random, doesn't it? Like all the different topics, like what do those things have in common?
Right.
And a friend of ours, she actually told us about this tool, this model, this thing that we're going to talk about in today's episode that is amazing. It's fantastic. And it really ties together and unifies like what this podcast is about, why we do the certain topics that we do, and kind of, again, threads through what all that looks like. So we're excited to talk about that. But before we dive into that, we do want to say a couple things. So one thing is this will actually be one of the last episodes of season 1. We're actually going to try a 6x7 in the next episode as opposed to 7x7. I know those get a little long. So we're going to try a 6x7, and then maybe in season 2, we'll shake it up a little bit, try a 7x5. We'll see. But yes, so we are coming to the end of season 1, and the plan was to do like a month off and then come back into season 2. And as we were looking at the calendar, we were getting our guests lined up and everything like that. We're like, man, this is smack dab in the middle of holiday season, like right in Halloween, then Thanksgiving, then, all the things, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Christmas, all the holiday seasons of December. And so we're like, man, that's just a terrible time to add a podcast to the mix.
it's a wonderful time.
It's a wonderful time, but realistically,
we
for
need to let you catch up too.
exactly. There's so many great episodes.
Yeah.
No.
So we decided to take a little longer of a break, but
Yes.
so you don't miss us too much. What are we gonna do?
We're going to do a couple things. Number 1, we are actually going to do 3 holiday specials. So yes. So the week before Halloween, we're going to drop an episode. The week before Thanksgiving, we're going to drop an episode, and the week before Christmas. That is the plan. And then in January, we're going to come back with season 2. We've already got some amazing guests lined up for that one. It's going to be really cool. We're going to change up a couple things with the format and the podcast, because it's growing. It's changing as we should as human beings. But if I may, Stephanie, I'm going to go ahead and dive in. Oh, and one other thing too. Sorry, real quick. So also you may be wondering, like, man, what am I going to be doing while without Intentional Thriver episodes dropping every week?
What are you gonna
My goodness, what am I going to do with all that time? So there are two things that you can do.
What are they,
those
Justin?
weeks. I will tell you at the end of this episode. I know. Cliffhanger. Yeah. Okay, here we go.
Like and subscribe so that you can come back to it. If you
slide that in.
Yeah.
That'll be like the New Year's resolution for January, listening to the Intentional Thriver podcast, season 2. Okay, wellness. Let's dive in. So like I said, there was a friend of ours who actually told us about this model, and it's actually a model that has been around for a very, very long time. Quite a while, thousands of years. Different cultures have adapted this in different ways. So I don't know if you're familiar with a model called the wellness wheel, or the wheel of wellness, the holistic wheel, the well-being circle. There's a lot of different names for it, but essentially it boils down to the concept of like having balance in your life in a lot of different areas and a lot of different topics, and the interconnectedness, how one plays into another. So a lot of people will know it as like mind, body, spirit, those 3 things, and how they're, connected, how your like physical health affects your mental health, affects your spiritual health, affects your emotional health, all of those things. And that's absolutely true. And again, we have seen that for thousands of years. I mean, you see that in traditional like Chinese medicine, you see this within Native American traditions and ways of life. You see this in India, in Ayurveda, and you see it.
Did a yoga session with Alexandra before that, and it was that breathing and the calmness and the whole.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you see it in Jewish tradition as well. In the Torah, you see it talks about dedication of like heart, soul, and strength. So this idea of holistic well-being and living has been in cultures and societies and traditions for thousands and thousands of years. And then over time, we've seen it, grow and change as psychology started, as a field emerging a little bit more. You see guys like, Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, and, they had some pretty out there ideas and some things. But one thing that they did, really start advancing in and learning more about was, again, that interconnectedness, the connection between, psychological, physical, emotional, how all of that stuff is kind of tied together. So their work really laid the foundation of what kind of grew and developed in what we saw like in the 1970s, especially in the United States, what was known as like the wellness movement. So you had guys like Halbert L. Dunn and John W. Travis, and they were pretty big advocates of this idea of wellness, holistic wellness, mental health. And so Travis in particular, he created something called the wellness inventory. And that's where he kind of broke up different categories of, again, what you would think like mind, body, spirit, or, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual health, kind of all those things. He kind of broke it down into different categories of like self-responsibility, nutrition, fitness, stress management, different things like that. And then over the years, we've kind of seen it grow, transform as we've learned more, as, society is evolved, medicine, healthcare, all that stuff has changed. We now have kind of developed into what is known as like the modern wheel of wellness. And to your earlier question of how many categories are there, the question is, it varies. Whoa. So there is no actually like one in particular wheel of wellness. It's still kind of growing and developing as it has over time. And, different organizations will adapt it a little differently. So it's used actually a decent amount in like education and healthcare, psychology, obviously. But traditionally you'll see between on the smaller end 6 categories, on the higher end 12 or 14. Oh, right. Yeah, so it varies a decent amount. Think of like a pie chart. It's like a pie chart with different components in it, or like spokes of a wheel. So we actually have taken, like I said, we did a deep dive, guys. We did a deep dive, and we actually went through, again, I've seen everywhere from 6 things to 12 things. The one that I have felt like communicates a really good, like it's not so many categories that it gets overwhelming, but I feel like it covers each important aspect is actually eight categories. So we actually developed our little intentional thriver version of the Wheel of Wellness. If you're watching, it's up on the screen right now. You can see, or if you're just listening, that's no problem. You can go to theintentionalthriver.com, and that document is available for download, absolutely free. And that's actually, we're going to talk a little bit about this later because there's an exercise that you can do with that document that is incredibly beneficial for talking about wellness. But now we're going to dive into those 8 categories really quick, kind of give a brief overview of what those are, why those are important, and again, how they apply to this podcast and what we're trying to do on the Intentional Thriver. So Stephanie, why don't you start us off? Why don't you give us, one of them and we'll go from there. So
well, the first one on my list is physical wellness, which, like I said earlier, is not one that I would give myself net props to, and I could work on and strengthen. I'm actually meeting with Jessica to do some labs to better my knowledge of how things are working.
Another little plug for Jessica there.
Right.
The guthealingninja.com. She's amazing. Sorry, go ahead.
So your physical wellness will involve things like how you sleep, how you eat, how you your gut health, your external physical appearance, your skin health, all these things. And even the way that you eat and what you eat affects your mood swings. So it's also entwined with other elements of the wheel.
Absolutely. And that's why, there is so much interconnectivity with all of these things. Like you'll hear something about physical, but it's like, oh, but that's going to affect my, emotional wellness or my spiritual wellness or, my, all these other things. And it's like, because so many of those things are connected and intertwined. Yeah. So physical wellness is one of them. Emotional wellness is another one. That's a big one.
Yeah,
that's
a range.
That's a really big one. This is things like, recognizing and managing your emotions effectively. This includes self-awareness. This is going to include your emotional regulation. This is going to include your mental health things, which is, a huge, huge part of that. Your cognitive health, your ability to think clearly, how you make decisions, how you problem solve, how you manage stress, how you maintain mental, resiliency, coping strategies. All of these things are part of your emotional wellness. And that's a huge thing. I mean, that is vitally important. I mean, we've learned, especially in the last, 5 years, how the importance of emotional health. And we're going to talk more about that on the podcast. But so physical health, emotional health, what's next?
Yeah. So then we talk about social wellness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one that we actually do thrive in most days.
Yeah, we try to be intentional
about that. And so I think like having social interactions with people, our kids having social interaction. I was at the park the other day and met someone of a different faith, and we could have a great talk and talk about similarities, talk about differences. And I think that that's something that we come from a healthy place in our social interactions that lead to more social.
No, that's
and
good.
So it almost feels like when you are, like you said, with the wheel, if that's something that's hurting, it's not going to get better, willing it to get better. Like you have to work on the foundational elements of a social relationship, which start with in a marriage, you and me,
Yeah.
So,
and I think too, it's the quality of the relationships, and then like you're saying, the ability to build those, but maintain them as well. I think, and having that support network,
right? And as we talked about with the circles of friends, knowing that like I'm going to protect those center circle, and I'm going to feed them and nourish them, but my outer, circles are going to have a little less attention, and that's okay too, whether that's because that's their bandwidth and their capacity, or if that's mine.
Yeah. And I think as part of that social wellness, there also should be a cultural awareness aspect to that. So, respecting and valuing different and other cultures, and that awareness and respect of diversity and inclusion. And I think that's all part of that, that social wellness as well as you build and maintain those relationships. All right. So we have physical, emotional, social. Next up is spiritual. For us, it's very important. Like, we are very thankful for our relationship with God and our relationship with Jesus. This spiritual wellness category is talking about is like, do you have a sense and a direction of finding meaning and purpose in your life outside of just yourself? Like, what is your goal? What is your purpose in life? Like, why are you here? What is your mission in that? And, this includes values. It includes beliefs, practices that, again, give your life a sense of direction and meaning. So yeah, like for us, that's been a pretty big one in our lives.
Next up is one that I have seen both extremes of: occupational wellness.
Occupational wellness.
I have definitely been on the side of the ones. And
so tell me, Stephanie, what is occupational wellness?
Okay, well, that's where you are thriving in your work. You are feeling fulfilled. You are learning. You are stretching your mind. You have work-life balance. You are making healthy boundaries. So
career development.
Career development. Yeah, you're moving forward. You're being challenged, but not too much.
Right.
You're maintaining stress levels. So I'm excited because in season 2 we have 2 people we're going to be talking about that have a lot to say about work-life balance.
Yeah, that's a big one.
How to manage your occupational wellness.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge.
Which is interesting because the next one is actually financial wellness. And wouldn't you say, like, wait, occupational wellness, that's the same as financial wellness.
Wow.
What's the difference, Stephanie?
Oh my word. I think there is an element of that financial stability, financial wellness that, look at marriages today. Well, that's a high reason for people
divorce,
divorce rates and just stress levels and anxiety and all these things. So I think financially you can, and the other one is lifestyle creep. So you can make a lot of money and still live paycheck to paycheck. You can have a job that you're making bank and even feel fulfilled in, and
not be budgeting that well, not be saving.
Absolutely.
Not going to be, managing your debt or your.
And then there's the flip side where you can make very little and feel very fulfilled in your job and, be wise stewards with your money. And
or you can budget well, plan well, do all those things, but hate your job. So again, it's finding balance in that too. And like asking myself, am I thriving in my occupational wellness? Am I thriving in my financial wellness? And then the next one, am I thriving in intellectual wellness? And you're like, intellectual wellness? What is that? That is a few things. So this is the idea of, are you continually learning? Are you continually growing? And like Stephanie was saying, this can have overlap within other things as well. This can have overlap in your occupational wellness. I think it can have a lot of overlap in your social wellness. I think it have overlap in your spiritual wellness. There's so many areas that all of these are going to have interconnectivity, but that's the idea of intellectual wellness. Am I continuously learning? Am I growing?
Janae said I'm a lifelong learner.
Yeah, exactly like Janae said. Am I expanding my knowledge, my skills, my, creativity, my curiosity, my personal development, essentially at the end of the day. And there's a couple episodes, even as we've gone through, like, we were talking to, we've had a couple people on talking about kind of what their artistic journey has been with Brian and photography, Paul within, with artistry and things like that, and how they continue to grow and develop as artists, as creatives, as well as the occupational side, as well as their occupational wellness. So yeah, I think that intellectual wellness is a very important of how we thrive. Are we continuing to grow and develop who we are as people and where we're going? So, okay. So that's what, 7?
Yep.
So physical, emotional, social, spiritual, occupational, financial, intellectual. What is the 8th one, Stephanie? What is the last one?
The 8th one is environmental wellness.
Environmental. Okay.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Absolutely. So the health of our environment. So a big part of this is my leaving my environment, my community in a better place
Yeah.
than the way I found it.
Yeah, I mean, sustainable living, taking care of like the nature and the world, being a wise steward
Yeah.
of that. I love, what is it, the Chinese proverb that says like, when was the best time to plant a tree? It was 20 years ago. When's the second best time to plant a tree? Today.
Yeah.
Or there's like the Greek, it's either Greek or from India, but the proverb that says, it's like a society becomes great when the old men and the old women plant trees that they know they will never sit in the shade in. Like that's so good. And to me, that's what environmental wellness is. Like, am I investing today in the community, in the world around me to leave this area better for my children, for my grandchildren, for somebody else's children, for somebody else's grandchildren? Okay, so that's all 8.
Wow.
So that's what's involved in the Wheel of Wellness. Again, we'll pull that back up on the screen. So those are the 8 topics on there. Like I said, that document is available for download off the website, theintentionalthriver.com. So going back to what I said at the very beginning of like, what can we be doing during that time
What am I gonna do, Jessica?
when the Intentional Thriver isn't
But I know
dropping
what we're gonna
weekly
do.
episodes? I know we're gonna do. We're gonna hang out. No, we're gonna go through this as well. We've actually done it once already.
Yep.
Yep, and gonna talk through all of that. But here I have a little sample with me, a little printout. What you can do is you can print this out, or just pull it up on your phone or iPad or whatever you want to do, and it's a little exercise. So the question is, are you thriving or surviving? Using the Wheel of Wellness model, rate how you feel you're doing in each category on a scale of 1 to 10 on a separate sheet of paper. So every time then, like if you listen to the Intentional Thriver at all, thank you. But if you usually listen on like a Thursday or even a Wednesday when we drop the episode, or Friday or whatever it may be, you know, during the time, the interim time between season 1 and season 2, like take a minute and do this exercise. And actually, if you're really wanting to get the most out of it, try to do it on a semi-regular basis. Like try it for every week that we don't drop an episode. Try it 1 week. Try it once a week for the rest of the time. And it'll be very interesting to see, just like for us, how like as we were doing it, you kind of see how you become more aware of like, man, I haven't really thought about my environmental wellness. I haven't really thought about my intellectual wellness or my occupational wellness. Like I haven't really diagnosed that. That's not really like, a lot of times I'll think, how is my physical? How's my emotional? How's my spiritual? You know, those things. But what about those other categories that kind of just, we know something's kind of off, but we're not sure exactly what it is. Sometimes it's so good to be able to diagnose and figure out, wait, how am I doing? Because if we're not able to be honest with ourselves of like, man, really, how am I doing? Is there an issue? What in my wheel, what's kind of off? Where's the flat part of this tire? Then, you know, we're not going to be able to make those adjustments and make those changes moving forward. A couple tips to be able to get the most from this exercise. Again, I would encourage people to do this exercise. Again, it's free. You can download it off the website. A couple tips for getting the most is be honest with yourself when you go through the process. Here's a good one. Ask a close, safe friend or spouse to fill out one for you in addition to the one you fill out yourself. So, you know, when we filled it out, I filled out one of how I feel like on a scale of 1 to 10, I landed in each category. And then I filled out one of how I felt Stephanie landed for each of those categories. And she did the same for me. And then it's actually a great like date night activity to do. Do it with grace though, or, you know, you could ignite some issues there. But again, go in with a spirit of, yes, a close or safe friend or spouse. And then the importance of, don't just do it and then like, oh, okay, I did it, walk away. Like write out or talk to someone or discuss like why you feel like you gave yourself the score that you did in that process. That's very important, because when you write something or when you verbalize it, you're actually activating a different part of your brain. And so you're able to process it at a different level. And so that's a very good, important part. And then, like I was saying before, consider doing this activity on a monthly or other regular basis for a season. Again, it's not saying that, you have to do this in perpetuity for the rest of your life. Like, again, we're intentionally taking a little bit of a longer hiatus between season 1 and season 2 of the podcast in order to facilitate time to be able to be like, hey, this is a really good activity. Give it a try. Give it a try. And when you're like, oh, it's Wednesday, is a new episode dropping? No. Oh man, what can I do instead? Ooh, I could do that exercise. Ooh, I could do that exercise. So that's one thing you can be doing in the interim. The second thing that you can be doing is we will actually have a form on our Facebook page and on our website. And, all these topics, again, they're all involved within this wellness wheel. They're all, they may fall under emotional wellness or intellectual wellness or occupational or financial, or whatever it may be, but they're going to fall under one of those categories. But each of those categories obviously are things that Stephanie and I are interested in, that we want to learn in, that we want to grow in. But, obviously for you as our listeners, we want to hear what you guys are interested in as well. So we'll have a little form on there, and you can actually, it'd be very simple, just take you like a minute, maybe 2 minutes if you want to read it slowly. Like simple stuff to go in and click through like what topics you are interested in, and more of the types of guests, because like the hardest part with the huge amount of amazing guests that we have on is like actually picking which people to have on, because there's so many amazing people. Yeah. That's been a challenge for sure. But we've got some really cool people lined up for season 2 and season 3. We're already thinking ahead to season 3.
Yeah. So if we haven't asked you yet, you're probably in season 3.
So stand by. No, but if you want to fill out that form, again, it'll just take you a couple minutes, and then we have an idea from you guys what topics, and the type of experts and friends that we can talk to more on those subjects.